ericmuadethmuadeh.com. It is the beginning of trading, 24-hour trading for the cryptocurrencies. And here we can see in the US Central Time right now for July 17th, 2018. It's about 46 minutes since the new trading day for the cryptocurrencies. And let's take a look here. We can see there's a little bit on the downside right now. And I'm going to show you what the charts look like, because right now I'm going to show you what the battlefield and what is going to determine the direction of these markets short term. Now, this is going to be pretty much across the board on most of the cryptos, at least the large cap ones, the ones that I follow. Now, to understand what I'm going to be talking about here, to make the video brief and to the point, I encourage you to take a look at the links that I'm going to provide in the description. Here are the links. These are the playlists on my YouTube channel. To understand what I'm going to talk about, you might need to take a look at these links for more information, because they're going to explain pretty much where I'm coming from and why, where the market is trading right now. It has a choice to make. Either we are going to see resistance right now in the market, or we are going to move above the resistance level. Now, to understand this, let's begin by taking a look at Ripple's hourly chart. And again, to be clear, on the hourly, I am using RSI setting of 26. The reason being that this removes some of the noise from the default RSI setting of 14. All right, that's just my own setting, but you'll notice something here, and this is true across the board. Number one, take a look at this bounce that we saw here over the last couple of trading hours. This bounce is pretty much as a consequence of making lower highs in price with improving technicals, lower highs again in price with improving technicals. So that was positive divergence. And keep in mind, all of these charts for the most part are going to show that we bounced back above RSI. We found support above the RSI level of 30.9. And again here, we found support above the RSI level of 30.9. Again, to understand this, where these numbers come from, I'm going to provide links in the description of the video. Now, why is where we are trading critical? Take a look at where the RSI is trading right now. And again, go back to this video series here, which is called RSI 50 crossing, or RSI uniform activity support or rejection. This is something those of us who follow stocks are very much aware of, how markets respond to certain levels. And here's a perfect example. Right now, we're potentially forming a double top rejection at the RSI 50 level. So this is the RSI 50 level. You can see market choosing to come and test this level twice. Right now, we are forming a double top. So if this continues to be the case, if we start drifting lower, chances are we might test these lows or even break through. And if this market is to move higher, it needs to start trading above the RSI 50 level. Now again, keep in mind that I'm not the one forming these charts. The market is doing this on its own. And yet we can see it is coming back and stalling at the RSI 50, which is something that we know, something that I've talked about for many years, that stocks do get tested when they try to move above the RSI 50 level. Here we are seeing rejection in price. The more this continues, the more it is suggesting that more than likely we are still looking at a market that has good odds of testing the lows from yesterday, maybe even break through them. Now, there's also another theme. All of these cryptocurrencies are coming back to test the recent break level. For example, here was the break for Ripple. So Ripple broke down here on the hourly chart, which is off the highs there. We take that information and draw our uniformity resistance line. Again, the links are going to be in the description of the video. And you can see the line comes from this break right here, this uniformity line. And guess what? The market is coming back and choosing to hit this line twice. That's a double top, meaning that unless it can move above this line, again, unless it can move above this line, this means that we go back to a market that wants to take the cryptocurrency instruments lower, potentially to test recent lows, either test them or break and make lower lows. Now, this is a chart for Ripple. Let's take a look at the big one, Bitcoin. And this is the hourly again. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about two levels. You can see Bitcoin has chose by itself. You are not the one doing it. I'm not the one doing it. It is doing this on its own. Bitcoin has come to test the RSI 50 level. It is being rejected with uniform action. Now, this is something that I talk about. It's my own theory that I came up with many years ago. And this is uniform action rejection. We can't argue with that. That's a fact. Okay. That's just how it is. And take a look at, this is happening over the last couple of hours as far as Bitcoin is concerned. And I'm laughing because this is something that I've talked about on my YouTube channel for many years. In fact, I have an ongoing playlist. Right? It's something that we know. Okay? So it's always interesting to me to see it happen over and over again. So not only is it RSI 50 being tested, it also doubles up, because remember, these stocks in general have an amazing memory. Why? Because take a look at where it broke down in terms of momentum recently, and you can see there was a break right there. That break so happens to be one of the technical reasons why after the break here, which corresponds with this price break, why we go into this tailspin that has taken it back below 10,000, because it broke here. So which means if we take that level and draw our uniformity line like that, right? The line happens to be exactly around the RSI 50 level, which also corresponds with, guess what? Our previous resistance level there. So BTC doing the same thing. So if Bitcoin is to do well, if it is to recover, the first order of business short term is to move and hold above RSI 50. Otherwise, this is suggesting that it might be looking to come back and test recent lows. Or let's even say it might be, this is the lows right now here. It might need to pull back a little bit. But ultimately, if it's to do well, it needs to move back above these two resistance lines. The first line being from RSI 50 level, and the second line being from the break of this line here, which is also doubling up at the same level. So it needs to move above those two lines. Otherwise, we are still looking at a market that could easily test, if not break through, yesterday's intraday lows. So watch this here. So we're coming towards the end of the hour. Right now we're just right there. You can see right there the market is going to turn. So now we're going to be going into the next hour, and I'll show you how that is relevant. So take a look at this. So this is now after the close of the previous hour. Notice there is a possibility that this is actually wanting to form a double top on the hourly. Now, it's one thing to hit this line once, but if you hit this line 2 times and form a double top, that is more of a bigger signal. In other words, a double top is more reliable. And if we end up getting that double top on the hourly, that is suggesting that for sure this is still needing to pull back to some level. Maybe take back half of these gains from here to here. Maybe test half of them. We don't know. But for now, if this ends up being a double top rejection at this line, that's a problem. In fact, let's take a look at other cryptocurrencies. Let's begin with Let's take a look at EOS. Notice that it is also coming back to test the RSI 50 level right now. It needs to stay above this if it is to do well. Otherwise, if it ends up showing resistance at the RSI 50 level, and in fact, if it also shows double top, if it ends up showing a double top around the RSI 50, that's going to be suggesting that we are still due to test some of these lows here that we made over the last 24 hours. Take note that if it draw this line this way, this line also corresponds with the break. So there was a trend line break here. That break corresponds with this movement here. You can see uniform activity rejection during those hourly highs. And now we are coming back to test it. So if we want to move higher, what EOS is going to need to do is move above this line. Otherwise, confirmation of resistance here, especially if it turns out that we end up having a double top here, you can rest assured that we are going to start pressing lower in the short term. Let's take a look at another crypto. And here we have IOTA. And again, take note of where it's trading at. It's coming back to test the RSI 50. It needs to hold above that if it is to do well. Otherwise, we are going to see this one pull back. Now, when I say hold above 50, don't forget, sometimes we forget that instruments move higher with momentum when the RSI is above 50. You'll notice this movement lower, generally speaking, if we take this movement here, all this has been with the RSI trading below 50 on the hourly. And since it moved below 50 here, which is this level, pretty much we've been lower. So this is a consequence of trading below RSI 50. You trend lower when you're trading below RSI 50. Now that's a known phenomenon. So nothing new. Take a look at the recent break in terms of where IOTA broke down before the recent slide. And again, we can see there was a trend line break right there. Once we break down there, we come off those highs. We draw a line from there, which is what I call the uniformity resistance line. Again, this is my own personal theory that I've been using for many years. And we can see we hit this line, double top rejection here. Also is a double top rejection. This here is a double top rejection at the RSI 50 level, right? And so now looks like we're doing the same thing. Right now we are showing double top rejection, suggesting that this might be pointing down as far as the current market situation is concerned, unless it can change direction and move above RSI 50, and also unless it can move above this break line. And this break line is from this level, which corresponds with the previous trend line break right there. So right now, if we take what we see, it looks like double top. Double tops are more reliable. Again, we look like still showing potential for pressure to the downside in the short term. Take a look at Monero. And again, no surprise by now, you can see that this seems to be like some type of a science or some type of a read on energy. Because all of these instruments, even though they seem to be trading independently of each other sometimes, but generally they are all coming back to test the RSI 50 level. And again, this is a known phenomenon. It's something some of us have been studying for many years. And you can see a break of this line recently brings the instrument off those levels. All right, so we take that information and draw our uniformity resistance line. And guess what? Over the last hour or so, we've come back to that level. We seem to be respecting it. Remember, these instruments, or trading instruments in general, have a tremendous amount of memory. So right there is the resistance level. And again, it is being confirmed by Monero. Let's take a look at Ethereum. And here we can see we made lower lows, had an improvement, made another low, and again another improvement. In fact, you can see at the lows here, we did not break below RSI 30.9. So I'm going to include the links to all these things in the description of the video. But notice, now remember, I'm not the one doing this. These are the cryptos. These are trading instruments. We seem to be coming back to test the RSI 50 over the last couple of hours. We've hit the RSI 50 level twice. We've been rejected with uniform activity. So if Ethereum and other coins are going to move higher, they need to start moving back above RSI 50. As we've been seeing here, which seems to be the theme, the more they show double top rejection around RSI 50, the more they are suggesting that the next meaningful swing trade is going to be down. Okay. Now take note also of the fact that this also is the same level which corresponds with the previous break, and we can draw it right there, and that break corresponds with movement. The break right there corresponds with movement of those highs. So we can take that information and draw our uniformity resistance line. By now you know the drill. There is the line, and you can see that Ethereum tried to move above this line and kept getting rejected, which were the highs. All right, and since then, of course, we know it went on to trade lower. Now take note of where we are trading. The market is choosing to form a double top on the same line. In other words, the same rejection we saw here is now happening here over the last couple of trading hours. There is another way to look at this, which is to consider the backtest line. What do I mean by that? Well, let me draw the line. It's this line right here. Right? This line was also the break of this trend line here. Once we broke down, corresponds with that level right there. Since we broke down there, we started picking up momentum lower since that break. So what we can do is extend the same line like that. And guess what? The market's coming back to backtest that line. We've hit the line twice over the last couple of hours, and we are still not able to move above it. So the more we struggle to move above those two lines, the more we struggle to move above RSI 50, the more it is suggesting that the next meaningful swing trade seems to be pointing to the downside. So clearly, this is where markets need to decide what they want to do. Now, this can get very complex, because if we take a look at the daily now, I want to show you why trading can get very complex in a hurry. On the daily time frame, if we take a look at Ethereum, if you take a look at the last bounce back above the RSI 50 level, so this is at the 50 level, you can see we bounced back above it for this movement and support right there. We bounced back above RSI 50 there for those lows. And now we are coming back in essence on a day-to-day chart to test this level. If Ethereum can clear the hourly resistance and coil up, then this is where it starts recovering. So it's a very complex energy fight going on between the hourlies and the dailies. But in summary, if the hourly charts can move above the resistance lines, and if the daily charts can hold RSI 50, something I talked about in yesterday's video, this is where you can start seeing potential for recovery. Let's take a look, for example, take a look at Bitcoin on the daily now. And you can see on the daily, right now we are looking at BTC trying to go positive for the day. Remember, now we're on a daily chart. Now this is critical. This seemingly innocent move is a big deal short term. Why? Remember in yesterday's video, I talked about this line. So go back to yesterday's video. I'm going to include the link in the description of the video. This level here got us off the lows somewhere there. And so if we draw this line, guess what? This is exactly what it is trying to do, is hold. If it holds this on the daily, then it looks like Bitcoin starts recovery. If it's going to recover, it means that it's going to take care of some of the problems we've been discussing on the hourly chart. Let's take a look at one more, which is the chart for Ripple. Again, for all this to make sense, take a look at the links in the description of the video, especially the one I talked about this current situation on the daily. So take a look at Ripple, and we can see here it is coming back to test this level here on the daily. This level held, which is the lows here, before we get this explosive price action. Now it is coming back and testing the same level. We seem to be holding. All right, let me show you one more daily chart. And this is the daily chart for Monero versus the dollar. Most all of these charts are versus the dollar. If you take the lows here on a daily chart, the lows here, and those lows, and you connect them, you'll see why on a day-to-day basis, Monero looks like it wants to recover. Because this line, if this line holds, then that's good enough to stem the recent slide. At the same time, if the line does not hold, if this line does not hold, then that's going to suggest that the support failed. Failure to hold support means that you get the opposite, which is continuation of the downside move. So clearly what we see here is we have a big fight taking place between the hourly charts versus the daily charts. Now, as a general rule, the bigger time frame always wins versus a smaller time frame, which means the hourly chart is going to have to clear RSI 50. So RSI 50, they're going to have to move above RSI 50, and all these cryptos are going to have to move above the uniformity resistance lines. Remember, we talked about most of them were coming to hit resistance with a double top, right? They need to change that mentality and move above their resistance lines. If they can do that, then the dailies are in control, which means that the dailies are correct in predicting that the next meaningful swing trade is to the upside. But frankly, there is a bigger question here. Now if you take this chart here, which is of course a representation of Bitcoin, this has been a massive run up, trading below 1,000 last year in April, going as high as 19,700, give or take. So from 1,000 to 17. So the question is, are we going to be moving, trying to recapture the highs? Are we going to be sideways for months, for years? That's a huge question. And the reason why I asked that question is this type of move does not necessarily mean that we go back to new highs. Just because we recapture daily momentum doesn't mean we go back to the highs. You might be within the construct of this recover, and then eventually still go lower. That's the problem. That's the big question. Are we now in a sideways to down market? Right? That's a huge question. For example, take a look at the chart for the semiconductor index. This is similar to what Bitcoin did. Now you can see it took how many years for this, after this movement here. Yes, you have sideways action here, but this took almost 17 years to come back and test these highs. 17 years. Right? I'm not suggesting it's going to take Bitcoin 17 years to go back to 20,000, even though I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody really knows, is the point. Take a look at the gold chart. So gold had a fantastic run from 2002 to 2011. Since 2011, it hasn't been back to these highs. So this would be similar to 20,000 as far as Bitcoin is concerned. Since 2011, gold has yet to go back to these levels. And so we're talking about, it's been about 6 years plus since the highs. So that's what I'm trying to say, is I've been trying to say this, that just because Bitcoin hits 20,000 doesn't mean it has to go to 21,000 the next day. It might take years, it might take months. It might never go back there. Again, nobody really knows. Take a look at the S&P 500. Had a good run from 95 to early 2000, and then it settled down for about 2-3 years before picking up momentum again, and then it dropped again. Now if you take from this point here in 07 to where it goes back to the same highs, you're talking about 6 years between this point and coming back to test the same and break out above those highs. 6 years. So it gets very complicated when, people say that cryptocurrencies are going to go back to new highs. I believe we have to admit we don't know. See, the charts will tell us moment to moment, but in truth, we don't know. And I don't think anybody really knows. Take a look at the Japanese market, the Nikkei. This was a huge bull market. And this was at the end of 1989, early 1990. And so far, it's been 28 years. We've never gone back to those levels. And that's just a reality. There's no arguing that this market has yet to test these highs 28 years later. Let's take a look at the Dow Jones here, and we can see that with the highs here in 2007, we can call that at 14,000. So after we get the crash of 2008, the only way you would predict that the Dow would go to 15,000 and beyond, the first thing the Dow would have to do is break out above the previous highs. Right? Just like the Dow makes a high here at around 18,000, it pulls back. The only way the Dow can move to 19,000 or 20,000 or 21,000, or even heck, the current high is at 26,000. The only way is if it was to break out above 18. That's the only way. Right? You have to clear the previous highs if you're going to make substantial improvement above the previous highs. Which means if you expect Bitcoin at some point to go to, let's say, 21,000 or 22,000 or 30,000, right? Or 100,000, assuming that's even in the cards, the best thing to do is to wait for a breakout above recent highs. Because the only way it gets to 21, it has to clear 20,000. So rather than be caught up in this sideways action, which might be going nowhere for many months, many years, if you're waiting for true momentum, then you have to clear the either recent daily highs, daily closing highs, or recent weekly closing highs or monthly closing highs. If you want to wait for momentum, which is when instruments are really on fire, you have to wait for breakout above the current all-time daily closing high, or the current weekly closing high, or the current monthly closing high. Otherwise, who knows how long we are going to be sideways before we ever test the recent highs at 20,000. If we ever test the recent highs, it might be in time, and time is an X. We don't know what the time is going to be. Some markets might take a couple months. Some markets, as we've seen, take many years. Eric Muadeth, Muadeth.com. As always, good luck, peace, and blessings. EOSUSD. Mwah.